Today, we're going to deconstruct the incredibly complex and, frankly, dangerous standoff that's been brewing in the Middle East. It's a story that's all about this massive, overwhelming show of military power, but also, and this is the key part, its surprising vulnerabilities.
You know, this whole thing kicks off in a place you'd least expect, an airport terminal. It all starts with a simple notification on your phone. Your flight has been canceled. For a lot of ordinary travelers, this was the very first sign that something huge was happening behind the scenes. And just like that, this huge, abstract thing called geopolitics smacks you right in the face. Imagine, you're on your way to a meeting in Dubai, maybe a vacation, and boom, flight's off. That's really how the first ripples of this whole conflict were felt, not through some news report about missile tests, but through grounded planes and completely upended travel plans. All of a sudden, you had major European airlines, we're talking Air France, KLM, pulling their flights, and not just to Iran, but to major hubs like Dubai and Tel Aviv. They were taking absolutely no chances. The official reason they gave? Just this vague phrase, the geopolitical situation. So what was really going on? Well, it turns out those canceled flights were a direct reaction to this, a massive deployment of U.S. military force all heading straight toward the region. And the language coming out of Washington, it was anything but subtle. President Trump himself was using words like big flotilla, armada, and massive fleet. Now, those aren't just descriptions, they're signals. This wasn't some routine rotation of troops. No, this was a very deliberate and powerful show of force. And this armada, it wasn't just talk. We're talking about the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, and its entire strike group, rerouted from the South China Sea. Joining them were F-15E Strike Eagles, destroyers, and some of the most advanced air defense systems on the planet. This is textbook coercive deterrence, right? It's using the threat of absolutely overwhelming force to try and make your adversary back down. So, what was the behavior this massive force was meant to change? Well, the official line for this military buildup pointed directly at Iran's brutal crackdown on its own people. As protests spread across the country, human rights groups were reporting a staggering death toll, and that became the public justification for applying this immense pressure. But here's the thing about pressure. It doesn't always work the way you want it to. As that American armada steamed closer, the rhetoric from Tehran didn't calm down. It escalated to a frightening new level. Iran's military, including the very powerful Revolutionary Guard, was put on high alert, basically preparing for the absolute worst-case scenario. This warning, coming from a senior Iranian official, was crystal clear. I mean, there is zero room for misinterpretation here. They were saying there would be no difference between a limited, so-called surgical strike and a full-blown invasion. Any attack of any kind would be treated as an act of all-out war. And they promised their response would be fast and severe. To really get why that threat is so terrifying on a global scale, you have to look at this little stretch of water right here. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical choke point for energy. Seriously, think of it as the jugular vein of the entire global economy. If you disrupt the flow of oil through here, you don't just spark a regional crisis, you could trigger a global economic meltdown. And this lays out the nightmare scenario, the domino effect that had everyone on edge. A U.S. strike could trigger an Iranian retaliation, not just on American bases, but on allies like Israel. From there, it could easily spill into the Strait of Hormuz, shutting down oil supplies and potentially igniting a much wider, truly devastating regional war. Okay, so this brings us to the absolute heart of our explainer today. We've seen the incredible, awe-inspiring power of a U.S. carrier strike group, but the question is, in the 21st century, does that immense strength also create an immense vulnerability? So let's ask the big question. Is this incredible show of force, this armada, really foolproof? Or are there new technologies, new tactics out there that could completely level the playing field? All right, let's talk about the symbol versus the reality, because there's a massive gap here. On one hand, you have the symbol, the USS Abraham Lincoln, this icon of power. But on the other hand, you've got the reality. And for that, we have the cautionary tale of another carrier, the USS Truman. The Truman's mission to the Red Sea, well, it was a bit of a disaster. It lost 3 FA-18 Super Hornets. One was actually shot down by friendly fire from its own escort ship. The carrier itself collided with a merchant ship. Another jet just slid off the deck while being moved. And a fourth was lost when a landing cable snapped. And get this wasn't enemy action. This was human error, technical failures, and just the sheer grinding stress of operations. And that gets us to the really crazy economics of modern warfare. Just look at these numbers. An attacker can use a drone that costs less than 100 grand to pose a serious threat to a $60 million fighter jet. They can launch a $500,000 missile to go after a multi-billion-dollar warship. The math is just tilting completely in favor of the attacker. This, right here, is the very definition of asymmetric warfare. So, where does all of this leave us? This standoff isn't just about the US and Iran. It's really a case study in how the very nature of conflict itself is changing. So what are the big takeaways here? All right, let's boil it down. First, the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation from either side is terrifyingly high. One wrong move could set everything off. Second, the old idea of military dominance is being seriously challenged by cheap, easy-to-get technology. And finally, and this is crucial, all this external pressure could totally backfire. Instead of getting Iran to moderate, it could end up empowering the most hardline factions, making the whole situation even more dangerous. And that leaves us with one last, really important question. We've built our whole understanding of global power on these incredible, expensive symbols of military might. But when a cheap drone can hold a billion-dollar fortress at risk, what does it truly mean to be a superpower in the 21st century? And what happens when the next drone doesn't miss?